Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of this podcast. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Final Fantasy VIII, or the remaster that's just been released fairly recently. Yeah, just spend a little bit of time talking about it. I've recently played through it on my Twitch channel. Man, there's so much stuff that's actually been changed. But first of all, like what Final Fantasy VIII actually means to me. It's my favorite Final Fantasy. Right, it's the absolute best Final Fantasy for me, for many reasons. I've probably played through maybe something along the lines of 10 to 15 times. I can't remember exactly how many times I've beaten the game, but it's definitely a lot. As for why it's my favorite Final Fantasy, it actually just came about at the perfect time. I was young as a teenager. I was around about Squall's age when I first played through it. And his edginess and his unwillingness to kind of like talk about his emotions and how he's feeling, that pretty much echoed me to a T, and I think I related to him a lot. And like how girls were treating me at the time, it just seemed to echo everything that I was going through as a angsty teen, as you do when you're kind of like at that age. But seeing this announcement, hearing about this announcement that it was going to be remastered was just like, it was almost the same level of hype that I got when I heard about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, Final Fantasy VII to me is awesome, don't get me wrong, it's a great game and it would be right up there with Final Fantasy VIII for me. But this remaster announcement just blew my mind. I was so excited, couldn't wait to play it, couldn't wait to buy it, like day one purchase. I was going to download it and play it at midnight, which is exactly what I did. I got like a 24-hour advantage because we live down here in New Zealand. We get games. We're pretty much the first country on earth to get games. So, sucks to be you guys. Anyway, played through it right away. And I only recently just finished it, actually. And I was just so blown away. So blown away by everything that was done. But there was actually a few things that I wanted to talk about real quick. It seemed to me that there was a lot of people that were very confused about what a remake versus a remaster was. And I think there was a lot of people who thought that the announcement of the Final Fantasy VIII Remaster was going to mean that the game was being remade in the same vein that Final Fantasy VII is being remade. And the reason why I say this is because there was a lot of backlash all over social media about the way that it looked. It just looked the same. There's a ton of comments out there, and I'm not talking about just one or two. There is a bunch of people out there being like, it just looks exactly the same to me. It doesn't look like anything's changed. Nothing's been updated. What's changed? Why aren't the backgrounds changed? Why isn't anything look any different? It was just a constant stream of this kind of stuff. And it was even all over the official tweets, the official posts and things like that. If you check the comments section, it was inundated with people being like, hey, what's going on? And I wanted to take a second to kind of like describe this stuff a little bit, because I did take the time to read through some of that stuff, and there was a lot of people who once had it, once they had the scenario kind of explained to them, and that, hey, it wasn't a complete remake, it was just a remaster. A few of them were still salty, but a few of them were like, oh, I actually didn't understand. I thought this was going to be a remake. So I think firstly, the two terms are they're actually starting to confuse people. A remake is essentially a rebuild from the ground up. It's a brand new game. That's what a remake is. A remaster is absolutely not that. It's basically taking an old game and porting it to a new platform. That's all it is. And in that process, if the budget allows, hey, look, we're going to spend some time, we're going to touch up these models, we're going to increase these textures, that kind of thing. We'll squeeze in as much of that as we possibly can with the budget that we've got. And I think they did a fantastic job of that, man. Like everything that was in this game that was 3D, and I mean everything. All the creatures, right? all the characters, all the summons, all the particle effects, it's all been remade. They've all been remade. Not just some, all of them. They've all had texture increases. They've all had model touch-ups and changes. They all look so much better than they used to look. And I wanted to just touch on the whole, point behind why the backgrounds haven't been updated. To cover it from in layman's terms, the backgrounds were not 3D. This is why they couldn't update them. The backgrounds were all pre-rendered images. They are flat images. And the source models or scenes that were once upon a time built to render those flat images are all gone. They've been lost. Square actually announced this. So to essentially update all of the backgrounds to Final Fantasy VIII would have been more along the lines of a complete remake. Now, I don't know how many of those backgrounds there are in the game, but there is a lot. A lot. I'm not talking about 20. It's probably closer to 100. And if you actually think about all of those scenes, they're not basic scenes. Many of them have city structures. Many of them have, they're underground tunnels, sci-fi bits and pieces, structures sticking up out of the ground, forests. Like this isn't just a simple, just rebuild one in a day kind of a scenario. Each one of those objects needed to be modeled, retextured, UV'd, lit, like some of them animated, right? Because of the whole cutscene between, cutscene to actual in-game transitions, all that kind of stuff needed to be taken into consideration. And you know what? That stuff just probably fell miles outside of the budget, and it would have blown out the production time to probably years. And lastly, it probably would have been, pushing the remaster aspect of this port closer to a remake, because at that point you're basically starting from scratch. You're building the entire world of Final Fantasy VIII from scratch at that point. Are they going to do that? No way. No way. There's just no way that they would do that. And does that suck for us, the fans? Yeah, I mean, I can concede that. Would I have preferred to see the entire thing completely remade from the ground up? Hell yeah. Would that happen in the future? Would I buy it again? Hell yeah. Oh yeah, I'd be there in a second. I'd be there. I'd play through it all again. Perfect. I would love it. But you know what? I'm happy with what they gave us, man. I could not be happier. So I just wanted to clear that up. And I think the other thing that kind of caught people out was the fact that I think that they remember this game looking a whole bunch better than what it actually did. Because when I started posting up comparisons on my Twitter and things like that, people were actually surprised. There was a few people that were like, wow, I actually didn't realize how bad this game used to look. It looked better in my memory. It looked much better. Now I can completely see what they've done, And I think that there's, there's always going to be an element of that. I mean, this game is 20 years old. And, when a lot of us played through this game, we were kids, man. We were kids. And we've got that really fond memory of just what these games were and how they looked and how they played. And playing that exact same game now, your tastes have probably changed a lot. And compared to the video games that we've actually got access to now, you play that PS1 version, man, and you're going to be like, God damn, this is some clunky shit, man. Because it is. It actually really is. It's slow. It's clunky. The load times are diabolical. It's a very, very grindy game. And that whole aspect, that rose tinted glasses aspect, it's still there. And it really did affect a lot of people's opinions, I think, until it was made very, very clear and they were able to go, oh, wow, they have actually updated a lot. The original version looks horrible. I don't even remember it looking like that. Man, it confused a lot of people. And I actually felt, I felt a little bit hurt because I was like, man, what the hell's going on with these people, man? Are they forgotten? What the hell is this? A really exciting kind of addition to this remaster was the fact that with the texture updates and the model updates, all of the cutscenes become so much more personable. And the reason why that is because you can actually now see the characters' faces. That's such a weird thing, but in today's day and age, we're so used to seeing that. Even in Minecraft, there's faces on the characters. Sure, there are only a few pixels, but there's faces. The faces in the original Final Fantasy VIII game were you could almost say they were abominations. I think the faces in Final Fantasy VII were better because they were kind of like hand-drawn eyes that blinked. But the faces in Final Fantasy VIII, they were so low res and the cameras were so far away from the characters that often all you saw was some jumbled mess. And now you can see the faces of all the characters. It's such a huge difference. All of the cutscenes and story scenes in the game just feel different. You can I don't even know how to kind of express that. It's so cool to see their faces. That sounds so weird. So the other thing that was actually added into this remaster of Final Fantasy VIII was the speed boost. This thing, honestly, was an absolute lifesaver. I think the addition of the speed boost is a ×3 speed boost. I think that actually made this old game, this old RPG, so much more playable. And the reason why I say that, and specifically because of Final Fantasy VIII, is because the way that you grow your characters in this game is so not typical. It's using the junction system. And for anybody that does know Final Fantasy VIII, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you don't know, now nearly all other Final Fantasies, the big summons were always like the really cool thing. In this Final Fantasy, they're called Guardian Forces. And basically what Guardian Forces allow you to do, you can equip them to your person in Final Fantasy VIII. And each Guardian Force unlocks a stat or unlocks a slot on a specific stat that allows you to then equip accumulated magics, which boosts that stat. And of course, it's quite a deep system, and it's really, really involved because you can get more powerful magics and equip those powerful magics into that stat slot that's been unlocked by your Guardian Force. What does that mean? Well, that basically means fire, Fyra, Fyraga, right? The three levels of fire spell. Sometimes goes up to Fyraja, like the fourth level, but for just for the sake of this, we've got fire, Fyra, and Fyraga. And let's say it's my strength stat. If I equip 100 fire spells to my strength stat, it may go up 20 points. If I equip 100 Fyra spells, it might go up 40 points. If I equip 100 Fyraga, it might go up 100 points. So that's basically how this system works. And different Guardian Forces unlock different slots. So you can, it just immediately from that, right, you can see how different this system actually is. And anyway, going back to the speed boost, why it's so important for the speed boost on this is because the accumulation of magics is mostly gotten from battles. And you draw that magic out of the enemies that you encounter. So every time you encounter a new enemy, you want to draw magic out of it to see what kind of new magic is there. Do you have all of these magics? A full stock of magic? That's what you want to get. But that process in the original PS1 game, one battle, and I'm not exaggerating at all, one single battle could take half an hour. One single battle. Why would it take half an hour? Because if you had any form of slight OCD like I did, you will want to, when you see a new enemy, the first thing you want to do is check what magic it's got, right? Check what magic it's imbued with, if you like, and then you want to draw 100 copies of that magic out for your 3 characters that you are currently playing the game with. You want to stock their magic to the absolute limit. Why? Because you never know. You know, that you may get a Guardian Force that unlocks a new stat, and you might want to equip 100 Dispels. You might want to equip 100 Protects, 100 Shells. You want to... The beauty of this system is that each one of these magics does different things to different stats. So you start mix and matching and playing around with the system. It's really, really deep. There's a lot of complexity there. And you really can kind of muck around with it right up into the point where you start getting into the ultimate magics of the game. I mean, at that point, when you're at the very, very, you know, tippity top of this magic tree, as it were, there are, you know, obviously some magics that are going to be the best in nearly all stats. But the advantage of having that 3 times speed boost is basically that your accumulation of magic can now take minutes instead of half an hour for one fight. And that is huge. It really is. That was one of the most grindiest things, and I think it put a lot of people off playing this game. That's gone now. I really want to stress that whole grindy aspect of accumulating magic to grow your characters, that's gone now. In this remaster, you can start working on your characters straight away. You can start building stats and growing your characters really, really quickly. I mean, that's a quality of life upgrade that this game desperately needed to bring it into the future, I think. And just one last thing on that, the whole kind of 3 times speed boost thing. The reason why this is so essential, or at least another reason why this was so essential, is because it was absolutely critical. There was no other way to grow your character. This isn't the kind of RPG where you run around and you fight monsters and you level up and you grow stronger. It encourages you to draw magic from enemies, right? To fight. It gives a purpose to fighting new enemies rather than avoiding combat, because you won't be strong enough to take on the next boss, or you won't be strong enough to take down the monsters in the next region if you haven't spent some time grinding. But you can also see why it put a lot of people off, because it forced them to do something that actually in the original PS1 version took a very long time to do. So yeah, 3 times speed boost, legendary. If I could just jump back real quickly to the graphical side of things as well. I think one important thing to note, or a couple important things to note, in addition to obviously all the model and texture upgrades, is just the fact that everything is anti-aliased now. So there's no more jagged edges, right? It looks silky smooth. And the fact that all the backgrounds have been upscaled and they've been run through bilinear filtering, which there is kind of pros and cons to it. The original, it was like 480p or something like that. Now it's 1080p, but it's a little bit blurrier. That's kind of what bilinear filtering does. It's not quite as sharp as it used to be, but if you just simply took 480p and blew that up onto a 1080p screen, you'd see a huge difference. So it does look better than it used to do, but it's not the ultimate solution. And something else that also that is just kind of like popped into my mind right now is the fact that there was a lot of people saying, there's a lot of kind of like AI out there now that is taking old games like Final Fantasy VII and taking the backgrounds of those games, re-rendering them and making, adding in a ton of detail where there was no detail before and all that kind of stuff. And why didn't they do that? Most of this stuff is all created by fans. That's the biggest thing. Now, I can't answer exactly the reasons why, but I would using my game dev kind of like background and knowledge, my guess on that, like why didn't they do that? It's got to be something to do with licensing, and it's got to be something to do with Square Enix. I'm guessing that Square basically said something along the lines of, unless you guys come up with your own AI and you reinvent this program, or you create this method of upscaling these textures and then we own that, you can't do it. Now, of course, this is just me speculating, so don't run away and say, that's what he said. Well, that's actually what happened. That's not what happened. That's just what I think is probably why they didn't do it. This isn't a fan remaster. This is an official product. It's an official license. Contracts were signed. Budgets were given. This is what was, this is what could and could not be done. And that's the reason why I think that they couldn't just reach out and, hire up somebody to kind of like invent this thing and run the entire game through it. I don't think that for a couple of reasons, I don't think that they would have been happy with that, happy with the output. And the first reason being what I stated earlier. I don't think that they would have been able to own it. And that's the biggest thing. Let's go over a couple of the other things that have been added in the remaster. There was, of course, an updated UI. The font's nice and crisp and clear, and it's easy to read. Not really that keen on the choice of the font, but it works. It's nice and clean and clear. That was the main thing, man. It was almost unreadable on the original PS1 version, man, especially on the PS3 port of that original PS1 version. Man, diabolical, dude. Oh, just real quick too, all the weapons in the game now have had a pretty big update. Textures and models, they all look so much better, crisper and clearer, a lot more detailed too. I quickly mentioned that there was like updated animation effects and spells and stuff like that. That's all been done. Load times, man, they have been cut down significantly. I mean, you'd expect that, right? We're talking about a PS1 console versus a PS4 console. That should be instantaneous now, and it pretty much is. It is. The load times are just what you'd expect, and that's for the better. One of the interesting things is that there is now an option to turn off the in-game timers in a couple of certain events during the game. I actually didn't even know that was there, but apparently it is. I'm kind of interested to go back and have a look at that, because that's something I didn't even think about. There's a couple places in the game, a couple of story events, which, that they're basically timed in real time, and apparently you can turn those timers off now, so you could, I guess, run around for unlimited amounts of time doing whatever it is you wanted to do in those sequences that are supposed to be, hey man, you got a job to do. You better get the job done. You've only got 10 minutes to get the job. You felt that kind of pressure. That's all gone now, I guess. There's also an option to turn off random encounters, which is pretty standard nowadays. There was also an option to turn on battle enhancements. I think from memory, that made you invincible. Now, somebody out there is probably just going, no way, man, that's not what it... But I can't remember, because I think I only turned this on like one time in the game. I do know something that it does do for sure, and that is that it's almost like unlimited limit breaks. So you can basically just be limit breaking over and over and over and over, permanently. So that's definitely in there for sure. What else is there? What else was added, man? I think that was pretty much it. In terms of like the quality of life stuff. The music is the original PlayStation version, right? It hasn't been like some remastered, like reorchestrated thing. It is the original PS1 version. I think there was some weird thing that happened. I think there was like a PC port or something like that, and it shipped with this happened a long time ago. It shipped with like a MIDI music or something. I can't quite remember, but I remember the fuss that got kind of, the dust that got kicked up over a MIDI version of the entire soundtrack, and everyone was like, what the hell is this trash? Pissed off a lot of fans, man. Something kind of related to that. I actually found a bug in the Final Fantasy VIII Remaster whereby I saved my game right after you hit the beach, right after the Normandy beach landing in Dollet, right? You fly up on this freaking half like hovercraft slash speedboat thing, right? And it just drives you right up on the beach, and you just come charging out of it, just like a Normandy beach landing, man. Soldiers charging out of these things, running up the beach, gunfire everywhere. I got up the beach and hit the save point, right, and saved it, and I quit out to the main menu, and because I was streaming at the time, someone in my chat was asking about is there a reorchestrated version of the soundtrack, and I don't know why, but I was like, you know what, I'll just go back to the main menu and have a look. I'll just quit out of the game. So I hit the save point, right, and I quit out of the game, and I checked the main menu for any kind of sound options. I jumped back into the game, and the soundtrack had switched from the original PS1 version to a MIDI soundtrack. Totally MIDI version. And I've got this recorded live, man. It bamboozled me, bamboozled the entire chat. Everyone was just going, what the shit's just happened, man? You've just found a crazy bug. I posted up online. I tagged Dotemu and Square Enix and everybody else. I just trying to be like, hey, man, not sure this was intended. But the MIDI soundtrack is still in there somewhere, man. What's going on, guys? And it kind of like blew up a little bit, but there you go. Apparently there was a couple of other spots in the game where you could do exactly the same thing. People were loading in their games after a session, and the music was MIDI. So yeah, it was freaky. The only way that I could fix it was to like just play the game with MIDI, and then when you got to a zone where the song would change out, it would just automatically revert back to the original score, which was freaking bizarre, man. But there you go, nice little tidbit there. Now there are a couple of things that I actually didn't like about this remaster. The first thing was Triple Triad. Man, this game for me is one of probably the best mini games in any Final Fantasy, I think, that's ever been created. I absolutely love this game, this mini game. It's basically just a card game, but it's just so basic and simple. The rules are so very easy, and it's such a cool game to play in game. And I think that the challenge was there, and the incentive to collect all the cards was there because they were related to you. There's character cards, and there's summon cards, and there's monster cards, and boss cards, and all this kind of stuff. You just wanted to collect them all up, right? So all of these, in the original version, all of these cards had almost like close-ups of the faces of these creatures, or just kind of like zoomed in kind of important areas of these creatures, so you could really identify and distinguish, oh, I can see that's exactly what this card is because I've seen that creature before, kind of thing. And all the hero cards had close-up portraits, and all the summons had close-up portraits and things like that. However, the remastered version kind of changed 90% of the cards, and the change on a lot of them is worse. I don't know why they did this, but they chose to almost zoom out and fit the entire creature on the card. And now, of course, the card's named, and you have you can see what the card's called. It's called the monster, and at a glance you can go, oh yeah, that's the creature, but you can't make out anything. It's almost like a giant silhouette. And anybody who's a fan of Final Fantasy VIII will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just, you know, like a Magic the Gathering card, you get like a monster card, and there's this cool like image of the creature or the monster or the weapon or something doing something cool, you know, just a big power pose, and or a face, like a portrait of a gnarled face, and you get like a lot of character and a lot of detail that was there in the old cards. Now it's like a zoomed out shot of the entire creature, and you're missing all of that personality. It's just a really odd thing, and the backgrounds of the cards are often taking up more space than the actual character or the monster. It's freaking weird, man. I don't even know where that decision came from. So that's my first grievance with the game. The second one, and this is actually, I can't defend this at all. I've tried to use my whole game dev perspective on this one, but I just can't. I'm coming up with nothing. And that is the overworld map and all the 3D models that are associated with all the stuff that is on the overworld map, which is 3D. The textures are all completely destroyed. Everything, like like what should be a tileable grass texture is just this jumbled mess of texture seams. It looks absolutely horrible. And this is something that could have been fixed relatively. Okay, look, it's not as simple. It's not just, just open that up, boom, touch it. It's not that simple, but it's not something that would have taken these guys months to do. I know that. I've done that before myself. It takes a little bit, but it's not. We're not talking months of time here. You know, we're probably talking a week or two. And I'm being pretty generous, man. I think if somebody was under the pump and they were really kind of whipped, and we were feeding them G Fuel and curries 24 hours a day, they could probably get it done, all the textures done for the entire world map in probably a couple days. Back in the days of like sleeping under your desk. I'm not condoning sleeping under your desk. I'm just saying, like, the amount of work that's involved in these overworld textures. Hey, look, there's a guy who actually streams live on Twitch. He actually opens up the texture packs for all these old games, and he redoes them. He's in Photoshop and he redoes them live. You can see him editing textures and changing the way that the game looks live on stream. I've seen him doing this stuff, and it brought back a bunch of memories for me doing it. And when I was watching him go through this stuff, I was like, nothing's changed. It's exactly the same. Why the hell didn't these guys do this? I really have nothing. They should have done this. I believe that is the one thing, the overworld map and all of the associated 3D models with it, the cliffs, the mountains, the train models, the train tracks, the roads, the little seaside town models, the models of the gardens, all of that stuff should have been retextured. I think what they've done, and the trap that they fell into, is that they basically took all of the existing textures, right? They scaled them up, probably 4 or 5, they were probably like 32 by 32s or something, 64 by 64s. I'm guessing because I haven't actually looked at those textures. I don't know what size they are, but let's be generous and say they are 64 by 64s. I'm guessing what they did was they took that 64 by 64, they scaled it up using some kind of linear filter, right? And now it's, instead of a 64 by 64, it's like a 256 by 256, or maybe a 512 by 512. I don't think it's a 512, because just by looking at it, I can tell. I've got, because I've done it before and I've worked in that space, it doesn't look like a 512, so it's probably a 256, and the square is pretty damn small. But it is blurry as hell, man. It is blurry as hell. And because of that, right, it's no longer tileable, right? That linear filter, that upscale, kind of blew the tileable aspect of these textures out, and they kind of looked at it and just went meh and left it. So now, like, literally just go and have a look at the freaking, the overworld map, and you'll see exactly what I'm looking for. And every single video game artist that I know that is listening to this podcast will be looking at that going, what the shit did they do? Why didn't they fix that? It would have taken no time. And yeah, I've come around to that now, man. I've seen the light. I've allowed that. I can't defend it. That was a bad, unacceptable, man. It really muddied graphically what could have been. There's a lot of fan mods that look so much better, and these people aren't video game artists, man. They aren't video game artists. They've got no experience with video games, and they've done a better job. And that's me saying that from the perspective of somebody who's done this professionally for a living. You have fans that have no clue what they're doing, slapping on grass textures, right? Looking up tutorials on how to make a grass texture, right? Chucking that into Photoshop, making a grass texture, a very, very small, tiny, tileable grass texture, and it looks better than what's there right now. That's a sad thing. That's a very, very sad thing. And take some points off for that, man. Dotemu, come on, guys. We deserve better than that, man. Everything else, top marks, but that, you're going to have to lose a few points for that one, man. Sorry, guys. Anyway, let me sum this one up, this first episode up by just saying that I think that this remaster is 100% worth it. Look, despite the shortcomings, the graphical shortcomings that I just mentioned just there, the fact that I can play this old game on my PS4, I can get a platinum trophy, right? A whole bunch of trophies to grind out. I can play it with a new controller, I can stream it easily, which is awesome, by the way. Being able to share these old games with a bunch of, people new to the series, new to games like Final Fantasy VIII, is just awesome. It really is, man. The whole point of me doing what I'm doing right now is I want to be able to share these things with people who have never experienced them before, and they don't really, their first Final Fantasy was like Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy XIII, games that came out kind of like 5-6 years ago. That's the kind of generation that, those are the kind of gamers that are on the scene right now. A lot of them haven't played these old games before, and I think bringing them to the new platforms is just, it's awesome. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's worth the money, and I think the quality of life upgrades, all of those little updates and things like that they've added into the game, they really make it compete right now with a lot of the RPGs that are coming out that are brand new. Sure, they may have, the brand new RPGs that are coming out now might have, a completely different set of graphical capabilities, and they look so much different and so much more high fidelity and all that kind of stuff. Definitely not going to argue that, but everything else, I mean, you couldn't really ask for more. Anyway, guys, that's it for me on Final Fantasy VIII. Do I think it's worth it? Do I think you should play it? Absolutely. I think everybody should check this out. I think it's an amazing thing that we can play this game again on, the latest generation console that we have. I'm pretty sure it's out on Xbox 360. Sorry. I'm pretty sure it's out on Xbox One, PS4. It's on the Switch. It's on Steam. It's basically everywhere now, and I don't think... I think that this is one of the games that, is worth preserving, and I'm really glad that they did it.